The 2025 NFL Draft is in the books. What lessons did we learn? We're going to break that down for you today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins, and we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Draft Pick of the Week later in the show.
Joe, happy, I don't know, what way do we want to go here as far as there's a billion different, happy new uniform announcement day for you and I and the rest of the AFC East and the, NFC West?
I saw AFC East and stopped reading. I didn't
Happy
care about the rest. Yeah.
New stadium day to Commanders fans everywhere. I know that's a big deal for the league, and Washington obviously on the upswing. So lots of news. Happy draft class and UDFA recap day for a lot of people everywhere.
Much to
get
celebrate
into this week.
Yeah. But I know the focus of our way of having our first conversation post-draft is to dive into lessons learned. Cal, there's only one place to start. And it's never hope that your team doesn't draft a specific player. Because guess what? Getting that player.
Yeah. You got Deion Walker, Buffalo Bills legend, Quinn Ewers, Miami Dolphins legend.
Yeah. So that's where you start. Don't have opinions about players you don't want your team to draft because guess what? You're getting them.
Just enter the process with an open mind, right?
Right.
And usually, if you watch on YouTube, we usually have like kind of a punch list and bullet list of items as far as like kind of the themes of the segments of the show. But this is such a broad topic with a lot of ground that I think can be covered that we kind of felt it was better to kind of leave this open-ended and just kind of see where this conversation goes as we start talking. Because the inspiration that I had, Joe, for this show was I'm listening to Locked On Bills, and you're talking about your day 3 haul, and you mentioned a couple of things with Chase Lunt, the offensive tackle, right tackle out of UConn. And I really like Chase Lunt's tape. I thought the ability that he had, the athleticism that he had, what he did in the run game, the ability to get up and block in space, it's all really good. But you mentioned on the show, first percentile wingspan or 0th percentile?
Lower. Yeah, zero percentile
wingspan.
Yeah.
Right? For all of the talk about Will Campbell and the concerns that existed, that's another player from a wingspan perspective that had that narrative that existed around him. But I think he playing at the SEC level, having I think what is a much better viability for flexibility to play a different position if tackle doesn't work, where I don't think that's necessarily the case. Listening to you talk about Chase Lunt, and I agree with you, like the height and the leverage element that he has is kind of a barrier and a blockade. I'm going to be looking at height wingspan combinations because like if he had 50th percentile wingspan, like I thought he had 3rd or 4th round tape.
Yeah, I agree.
But when you have that you have tackle exclusivity. Really, I think you mentioned only a handful of snaps not at right tackle in his entire 4-year career at UConn. If
one snap at left guard, one
snap, right? So you don't have positional flexibility. You're built like a tackle with complete outlier wingspan from your build and your shoulder width and your arm length and all of that. All of that combines for a player that got drafted just outside pick 200, or was it 170? Was it that pick at 178, or was it the pick in the 200s?
I think it was 206.
206, yeah. So as you start profiling players, Joe, We talk about the draft being a risk assessment from the outside looking in. And the risk assessment of probability of likelihood for a player with the stature and the reach and wingspan and the inability or perceived inability to play in other spots became a much higher risk for the teams making the picks than I think what a lot of people on the outside looking in perceive that. So I'm gonna internalize that. I'm gonna remember that for next year's offensive line evals.
Yeah, I think it's good information. Like you mentioned, I mean, I think you're not alone in thinking that Chase Lunt was probably every bit of a at least fourth round pick. I was in that similar boat, and several were as well. But you're like, okay, well, why did this happen? And I think it does signal what you're talking about. And I think maybe the other side of that coin is, well, what made the Bills the team that should pick Chase Lunt? And the Bills are very unique with their desire to play 6 offensive linemen in a jumbo role. And Chase Lunt didn't even start playing tackle until his senior year of high school, where he played tight end. So he's kind of familiar in those types of alignments. And the Bills are also a team that will play tall guys at guard. I mean, Tommy Doyle was 6'8", and he was in a pinch. Guess what? The utility tight end jumbo guy that, had to be done, which was the infamous Bills Heat game against Miami. Well, the Bills ran out of players, so now this guy's playing right guard, and that's just what happened. So I think the Bills were kind of the unique team that would make this investment, but otherwise, I mean, there's a world where Chase Lunt doesn't get drafted.
Yeah. So that's one for me. Now, I don't want to just sit here and run through all my bullet points. So not even necessarily through the lens of anything that I just presented with the Chase Lunt conversation. But as you look at whether it was where somebody got drafted or how a team chose to handle it, how a team chose to handle maybe drafting for needs or the kinds of players that they went to, what's something for you that you're going to internalize for next year's cycle?
I think it's the ball security stuff with running backs. Bashal Tutin is kind of the signature name here for me. He didn't go far down the draft, but he was a day 3 pick. He goes 4th round to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yeah. And, fumbling issues were certainly there. And because the rest of the skill set is kind of everything the NFL would want. I mean, you're seeing RJ Harvey goes round 2, pick 28. Travion Henderson, round 2, pick 6. You think about this admiration for what Jahmyr Gibbs has given Detroit, and I think teams are kind of wanting to get that guy. And you got a pretty big knock on the resume here with Bashal Tutin with fumbles. And obviously Jaden Blue didn't have the same type of resume as Tutin, but he winds up going in the 5th round as well, where, big play guys in the NFL typically go pretty high. And so I thought both of those guys as players that went a little bit later than I thought, in particular Tutin, who I thought was probably a rock solid day 2 back for some team envisioning that. Plus Tutin had you think about the Gibbs role, and the receiving profile wasn't necessarily developed to that extent. That's probably another layer of the evaluation. But, if those two things really come together, I think that, he can be a big play guy for Jacksonville.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. And I found myself, and my next talking point's kind of going to get into the same spirit of what we're talking about here through a different lens, but a devalued position, right? And you're looking for dividers. And I found myself as I'm writing a lot of these snaps or snapshots of these players for running backs, I'm talking about ball security. I'm talking about ball security, pass protection, and receiving contributions, right? Because the bucket of players that can line up and execute a zone concept or run into this gap, if you don't have a superpower trait, and I think that, who were you talking about? Was it Dorian Strong?
Yeah.
The corner? You're talking about he's good across the board at all of his traits, but he doesn't necessarily have the superpower hang your hat element. I think that applies to running backs too, where the guys who are good enough to just line up and run the ball where the ball is designed to be run and get what's blocked for them, there's a plethora of guys that do that. So what are the margins at that position? And ball security being one that I found myself in writing all of these write-ups. It's a point of, hey, one fumble and he might burn the trust of a new coaching staff because he's got a history of doing this at the college level. You got to be leery about it.
Yeah.
It's a good call out.
I got one more point on running backs to get into on the other side of it, plus more lessons that we learned. Be sure to stick with us. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and the last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Here's why I love using Game Time for tickets. While it is the last-minute deals, you can actually save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater events near you. Plus, the all-in pricing means there's no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
You want to finish running backs?
Yeah, I was just thinking about Devin Neal. He's a good player. I like Devin Neal, running back out of Kansas. He winds up going 6th round, maybe later.
Right. Yep.
Just had it right in front of me. It has escaped me. Another guy that's you're like really, 6th round of the Saints. Really solid player. But leaning into the superhero element, just being a solid running back across the board is not something that the league is going to value high. And so I think that's important to consider when you're kind of being a forecaster for the draft. Is like, all right, what's the trump card? What's that thing that's super important that differentiates the player as opposed to ordinary across the board? And so, especially at a position like running back, where there is a belief that you can get, a baseline skill set, get production. What are those differentiating factors? And if there's not really one that stands out, probably not going to be a super valuable prospect in the eyes of the NFL.
Yeah. I want to take this to safeties through the lens of what happened with this year's class, where there were some players that kind of, I was surprised to see a couple of guys not go. And just like when I did running back evals, and I find myself writing a lot about ball security, if you're trying to figure out, you get deeper into the draft, you get to 200 and later, and you're trying to figure out who are the safeties that are going to get drafted in this range. Realistically, you're drafting a safety in the late 6th round or early 7th or 7th round in its entirety. Are you drafting a guy that's probably going to end up challenging for a starting spot? Sometimes you do. But more often than not, you drafting a guy with a starting spot opportunity?
No, probably not. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So the only way that this pick at this juncture is justified is if a guy's got a very robust special teams role and profile. And I knew this one coming in, but seeing like Ryan Lane from Navy go 200 to Jacksonville, seeing Keaton Crawford from Nevada get drafted at 225, whereas you had Sebastian Castro go undrafted, or Malik Verdon, who had some really good flashes and had great length at Iowa State but couldn't stay healthy. If you ask me, hey, you're drafting for a defensive role at safety, I would rather have Sebastian Castro or J.J. Roberts from Marshall or Malik Verdon from Iowa State. But Roberts is undersized, woefully undersized. I think he's got great tape, electric tape, but he's an undersized player. Castro athletically is just not going to project well, and the injury stuff with Verdon contributes, I think, to him going undrafted. So you're seeing safeties that are coming off the board, and I had a 4 or 5 on Castro. I had a 5 on Roberts. I had a 6 on Verdon, and these guys don't get drafted. Now, I had Keaton Crawford draft or with a 5th round grade because of the special teams profile and what he could be on defense. But like Ryan Lane, I thought was a fringe draftable guy. He went in front of all those guys thanks to the special teams profile. So again, if you're trying to, there was more than one time I did a player eval this year, and I got done what I thought I felt, and then I asked myself realistically, like, does this player, whether it's the athletic profile or kind of the background of the size versus the role and the style of play that they have, does this all add up? And sometimes the answer was no. Like there were players like a Sebastian Castro that I wanted to like more than I did. And I kind of had to reel myself in. And I still gave him like a late 4th round, early 5th round grade. And he still went undrafted. Like I was still too high on him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what you mean. And that's a tough needle to thread. How about this angle with the safeties? And maybe it's a minor surprise that Nicky Manwari didn't go in the first round, but obviously the physical skill is really, really exciting. And I think we've seen this with other guys, maybe even a Jeremy Chin, Obi Melifonwu, if you guys remember him several years ago out of Syracuse, where you're just like, man, the NFL is going to pick these guys because they're so unique and so rare and the physical upside is through the roof. But I think with all three of those players, you'd look at them and say, do we have it from a processing perspective? And they've obviously, Jeremy Chin has had, I think, a good career. He kind of had a lull with some injuries, but I'm excited about him still. Melifonwu never happened, and now we'll see what happens with Eamon Wari. But at a position like safety, you love physical upside. You love physical upside at any position. But I think safety is a position where it's almost like the processing is more important.
Yeah.
It is. It's not almost like it. It is. Your physical upside can be diminished if you're not responsive and see it clean. And so that's something to keep in mind where if both of those things add up, like a Derwin James type guy, and even that guy didn't go super high. That's the special ones, but it can't just be big, explosive, long. There's got to be that read and react skill to complement it. Or I think the NFL is looking for reasons to push safeties down, right? I think generally speaking, and it doesn't take much if the processing doesn't line up.
What else you got? Or do you want to go to break?
We can go to break. And I think there's some injury conversation to get into.
Oh, yeah.
That would be interesting. We'll do that here on the other side of it, folks. Be sure. Stick with us. The Armada pick of the week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. This week, we're highlighting a top pick from the draft, the one selection that truly stood out. And our team to focus on is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs, the guy who showcased the strength and power to push the Chiefs forward as we look ahead to next season. This week's Armada and clear-cut top pick of the draft is first-rounder Josh Simmons, offensive tackle, Ohio State. Like the Armada, Simmons is built for a heavy-duty impact as a long-term answer for the Chiefs' offensive line at tackle, spot that they desperately need some help. And when it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what I think Simmons can do here. It's clear that our top pick of the draft is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop now at nissanusa.com. I had the whole league. I had the whole league at my disposal to pick something there, man.
Josh Simmons.
Yeah, that's where I had to go. I sidebar, I think the Chiefs draft is unbelievable. I mean, it's borderline perfect. I love literally every single selection.
So I haven't done the calculation yet versus my 33rd team board. But I have done the calculation against what was my Dolphins specific board.
Mm-hmm.
And Kansas City, as far as like value per pick versus my rankings that I had set for the Dolphins, they lapped the field on a per pick basis. Their average value per pick, surplus value with like you assign point values from the trade value chart to the picks and then the tiers of the players that you're grading. I thought they crushed it this year. They had a great draft. Yeah. Gelati is such a good fit for Spags.
Perfect. Too. Norman Lott, too. Noel Williams, Jalen Royals, Jeffrey Bassa, Brashard Smith. Come on. Not things we want to be talking about today. I can't deny it. Cannot deny it. So I think we'd love to talk a little injury stuff here. the signature name, probably Will Johnson. And it's tough because you don't always have all the information, and then it starts to creep up late.
Yep.
It's hard to apply it.
Smoke screen. Is it real? Is this
Yeah.
somebody just trying to gas him up to get him to
Right.
drop a little bit?
Because maybe that's true with Derek Harmon, who still went with 20 to Pittsburgh.
21
to Pittsburgh. You know, there was some like, oh, Harmon could fall. It's like, oh, probably not. It went exactly where you thought he would go. Will Johnson, not so much, right? Certainly a player that's a lot better than a midday. Right.
Yeah. I think you can even zoom out and look at injury history from guys that went later too. Like Tommy Hill from Nebraska was another corner, like big body corner. It is like the 6'2", 215 pounds, all the length in the world, former wide receiver. And I think the lesson that I have off of that one is that was in part due to some injury history there, but also like I need to stop referencing the Nashawn Wright draft choice from a few years ago.
Can't stop, won't stop.
Because Tommy Hill, I had like a 4th round grade on. I'm like, yeah, he's for sure the former receiver, this kind of size. Stanley Jean-Baptiste going back 10 years was kind of the same thing, right? And who was the other corner in that class that was just like laughably big? You know who I'm talking about, though?
Yes.
And the league has, I think it was so easy with Nashawn Wright being this out of left field player with all of this height and length that you see these corners with this size. I kind of talked myself into, well, Tommy Hill, former receiver, there's a lot of upside. He was at the Senior Bowl. He's super physical. But at the end of the day, he's a raw corner with long transitions because of how big he is with an injury history. Like there's enough points there where realistically I should probably have checked myself at some point in that individual evaluation. Not to say that Tommy Hill's not going to end up being a good player if he lands in the right spot, but more so, what is the league's risk assessment of this player going to be?
Yeah. I want to ask you a question about if there's a lesson to be learned about forecasting trades, because prior to the draft, there was so much conversation about how every team owned their original first round selection. And then that changed very quickly for 2026 with that talking points over. But, some commentary that, well, with a lot of teams wanting to move back, the price to move up won't be very expensive. And so we could see some more activity for trades up. And we really didn't, right? We saw the 5-2 deal with Jacksonville and Cleveland. Atlanta comes reeling back into the first round, and then the Giants. It's basically it. I don't really think much of the Chiefs and Eagles swapping pick 31 for 32. I would say this was generally a light first round for trades.
Yep.
How do you piece this together? Do you learn a lesson here about how you're going to talk about the likelihood of trades moving forward?
So I thought what was interesting was there were some mock drafts that had Pierce tied to Atlanta in the first round that came up late, right?
Mm-hmm.
But by and large, the perception of Pierce was that, at that point in the process, it was going to be outside of the first round. So maybe if I'm trying to find breadcrumbs in a similar ecosystem of a draft class moving forward, I'm going to say, okay, where is there a connection between an individual player and a team who might not be picking with their first pick in a juncture in which it makes sense? Because that's what happened with Jackson Dart, too.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The Giants were tied to Jackson Dart, but surely they're not going to take Jackson Dart at 3.
Right.
Well, can they facilitate coming up later in the first round and go get their guy? That's what they did. I had that one in my mock. What I didn't have was Jalen Walker falling to 15 for the Falcons to take Walker and then still get Pierce that slides down far enough where they say, hey, we want to go get this guy too. So as I'm forecasting trades in classes like this moving forward, it's going to be, where is there kind of a really hot tie between a player who maybe their projected value doesn't line up with where a team is originally scheduled to pick, and either a team trades down to get into a better position to pick that player, or they make a different pick and then come back up later and make it happen.
Yeah, I'll have to hopefully I can get a refund on my Jalen Walker Panthers jersey. I thought that was the lock of the century. Congratulations to us. I'll officially wait 3 seconds. All right. It took 25 minutes for us to talk really about quarterbacks. But what's the lesson here, Kyle?
We're 24 and a half minutes behind Mel Kiper this morning talking about quarterbacks on whatever Mel's doing right now.
Bro,
He's talked about Shadur the whole time.
I hope that's not his last draft, man. That's not a great way to go out. I mean, I didn't watch it, but I certainly have been briefed on what happened there. But
I had NFL Network on, and then I just kind of caught some clips on Saturday. I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah.
It's just outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, to come out and like the NFL doesn't know how to evaluate quarterbacks. Like, dude, I am so mindful of my hits and misses that I don't really want to dig in like that because, I mean, he deserved it. You can't say that and then be the guy that says I'll retire if Jimmy Clausen isn't a thing, right? Like, that doesn't work. You have to be. I mean, come on, Mel. I mean, love the guy. He's the reason we're all here, but that felt really odd to me. But outside of Mel Kiper losing his mind, how these quarterbacks fell. I mean, even doesn't have to be about Shadur, Jalen Milroe, and him being at the draft, and then he falls a little bit. I guess maybe not. Maybe it was a little bit more appropriate, but there had to be some belief that he could go earlier. Is there anything about the way that these quarterbacks got drafted in the order that they did in the range based on their skill sets? As we've had this conversation, it feels like for a number of years, dating back to the Kenny Pickett year, where we kept on inflating these quarterbacks because the NFL always inflates quarterbacks. But then it feels like there's been some recent history where they're pushing back on some of these guys that really don't deserve to be talked about as high picks.
Yeah. I think Matt Miller had this observation on either Saturday or Sunday. And he's like, the era of the league coveting developmental traits at quarterback kind of feels like it's in a low point right now, right? Where Milrose still goes 92 to Seattle. That's still a respectable range for a developmental guy, but he got invited to the draft, and there was all of a sudden this expectation that he was going to be a top 40 pick. So the three that go are Cam Ward, who's, I think, the highest ceiling of like where he is right now and what he could be with arm talent perspective. Jackson Dart and Tyler Shuck. And then it's Milroe, Gabriel, Shadur are the next three off the board. And heard some of the flirtation about Kyle McCord, goes 181. Will Howard, 185. Riley Leonard, 189. Graham Mertz, 197. And then my guy Cam Miller got drafted. I was pretty gassed up about that. Are we including Tommy Mellott as a quarterback, or is he?
No, he went to the Raiders, so he's definitely not a quarterback. The Brady influence, yeah, he's going to be the Swiss Army knife guy, right?
Right. Nick Curtis Rourke, 227, and Quinn Ewers, 231, and that's it.
Isn't there both sides of this, though, where, like, with all due respect to Jalen Milroe and Trey Lance, like, Trey Lance was a number 2 pick where the 49ers gave up everything. Are we sure that there's that big of a difference in caliber of prospect of Jalen Milroe coming out versus Trey Lance? I'm not convinced that there is. And then there's the other side of this coin of, like, who's the next Brock Purdy, and all of a sudden these middling quarterbacks get drafted way higher, and I don't think that happened either. Have we just normalized? Are we just going to be normal now about quarterbacks, and we can just take it for what they are and value them appropriately, where we don't have to elevate, experienced middling guys because of Brock Purdy, and we don't have to elevate every toolsy prospect because of Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes?
That'd be nice. Until the next team doesn't and they have success.
And then we just chase it all again.
Right. It's like the Anthony Richardson thing, right? Like kind of the same boat. Who's the quarterback who surprised you the most with how early they went, and who's the quarterback who surprised you the most with how late they went?
That's a fun question. All right, so let's look at the quarterbacks and the way that they went. It's obviously Dylan Gabriel.
Thank you. Yeah.
I was like, oh, Tyler Shuff. No, it's Dylan Gabriel. That's the one that had no business being a day 2 pick. The one that went
94.
Yeah, nuts. The one, and then I think the other side of this is like I'm surprised that some team didn't talk themselves into either Kyle McCord or Will Howard 2 rounds earlier, like 4th round. There's a better prospects than like Kyle Lauletta. Didn't Kyle Lauletta go in the 4th round?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
You see, don't you always just have these other names in your head when you're thinking about these receivers? Like, oh, what did the league do with this guy? And then it's not always applicable to that player.
Right. Well, I think that is a testament to the human element of it all, right?
Yeah.
But I'm surprised, like, if Shadur Sanders aside, right? And there's obviously a lot more going on with that evaluation and how the league chose to handle that than just who Shadur is on the football field as a quarterback from a traits perspective. If you'd have flipped Will Howard and Dylan Gabriel, I don't know that I would have been surprised at too much about the order other than like McCord being at 181. Like I was thought for sure that would be the guy because you and I had Howard in our top 100.
Yeah.
With kind of the expectation. So like if Cleveland had said, hey, Howard just won the Natty at Ohio State. We're going to pick him here in the 3rd round to kind of be a developmental roll the dice. I'd be like, okay, yeah. So I think Gabriel's the standout for going earlier than I thought. And then McCord and Howard at 181 and 185, I think are good call outs. Now, the last thing that I had was about a cornerback. I want to make sure I get my sheet filtered here. But it's about, you can make this about 2 players, really, and one's a wide receiver and one's a corner. You're not going to be surprised to hear that the wide receiver's name is Xavier Restrepo, in which he ran 4.9 or 4.8 at his pro day, whatever it was, with the hamstring issue that apparently popped up. But then there's also Kobe Bryant from Kansas.
Yeah, I don't get that one.
Well, you don't get why he went undrafted?
I don't.
He was 171 pounds at the Shrine Bowl and ran a 4.55.
Small and slow.
Small and slow.
Decent tape, though.
Xavier Restrepo, small and slow. They both had great college tape.
Yeah.
But they're small and slow.
Where did Tez Johnson go?
He went like the 6th round.
Yeah. Small and slow.
Small and slow.
Can't go to war with 7th round. It's pick 19
round.
in the 7th round. Yeah.
And like people were like ready to have Tez Johnson as a top 50 player.
Yeah.
So that was the last big one for me was just like, and it goes back to the Chase Lunt thing that we started this entire conversation with. There's probabilities and certain thresholds that you clear. And if you just come up short and like, I thought Kobe Bryant was a dog. He was one of the best players at the Shrine Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
But he's 6 foot 170 running one, and he ran in the mid 4.5s. Where are you going to play him? Are you going to play him outside? Are you going to play 4.45 on the outside? Or are you going to play him inside and ask him to fit the run? Right? It's just like there's a conflict that exists there.
Mm-hmm.
That I guess with a receiver, maybe you have a little bit more grace for because you could still be a zone buster, but you're going to be a middle of the field zone buster who sits down in zones and stuff. Most teams just use their wide tight end to do that kind of stuff.
Not super valuable, right?
Right. So that's the last one for me.
That's a great close. That's a great talking point.
There you go. That's going to do it for us here. Locked on NFL Scouting. Kyle Crabbs, Joe Marino. We got a bunch of reactions to the 2025 NFL Draft coming your way this week. So hit subscribe. Come on back. See us again tomorrow. We hope you guys enjoyed today's Monday episode of the show as we get ready to wrap up the month of April. And keep an eye out for some free agent signings. The compensatory pick window closes at 4 p.m. today. We'll talk to you all again soon.